I'm Harper Hayes. I'm 32. I built a $1 billion tech firm from scratch. But tonight, at my father's 75th birthday, I was placed alone, outside on the terrace, while the rest of the family toasted inside. Then my brother smirked and said, "Guess even money can't buy you a seat at this table." My chest burned. My hands went cold, but they have no idea. I didn't come here to be accepted. I came to be remembered. I didn't look back at Ethan. I just stared ahead at the single candle flickering in the breeze on that lonely terrace table. Below, through the glass railing, I could see the family laughing, lifting their glasses, basking in the kind of warmth I had never been invited to share. The contrast was almost poetic. Down there was golden light, polished silverware, familiar faces exchanging practiced smiles. Up here, the wind tugged at the hem of my coat, and the hum of the city reminded me of all the nights I'd spent building something none of them believed in. The Metropolitan was always my father's favorite. High ceilings, hand-painted menus, a wine list longer than my Caltech thesis. He used to say it was the one place in Manhattan where you were guaranteed to feel important. I wondered if he felt important tonight, surrounded by people who had only ever seen me as the odd one out. Funny thing is, this wasn't the first time I'd been seated away from the real table. I remembered being 12 at another fancy dinner. Maybe it was Ethan's graduation. My chair was stuck at the end of a buffet table near the kitchen door. I spilled apple juice on my dress, and no one noticed. I'd thought that would change as I grew older, more successful. But apparently, even $1 billion can't move your seat when your last name was never enough. My phone buzzed again. I flipped it over. A message from Ava, my head of product. "Ava, we need a call ASAP. Apex just changed terms. Could impact valuation, perfect timing." For a moment, I wanted to disappear. Just lean back in this chair, let the noise of the city drown out everything. But that wasn't me, and not anymore. I didn't get this far by shrinking. I got here by standing up, even when no one clapped. I grabbed my glass, non-alcoholic, because unlike the rest of them, I needed my brain clear tonight, and took a long sip. Then I stood, slowly, deliberately. Let them see me if they happened to look up. Let them wonder where I was going. I walked past Ethan. He didn't say another word, but I could feel the smirk lingering behind me like a shadow. I passed through the restaurant lobby. One of the younger staff glanced up from the podium. "Leaving already, Ms. Hayes?" I smiled politely. Emergency, work doesn't pause. "Of course," she said, nodding like she understood. She didn't. Few people did. Outside, the night had settled. Traffic on Fifth Avenue was thick but steady. I turned left, heels tapping a quick rhythm, phone to my ear. "Ava," I said once the call connected, "tell me exactly what changed." "The board at Apex leaked a counterproposal. They're trying to undercut us. If we don't respond by morning, Datacorp might start leaning their way." I closed my eyes, inhaled, then exhaled slowly. "Okay, stay calm. Loop in Eli and Sarita. Tell them we're holding an emergency strategy call in 30 minutes. I want options." "Yes, Harper." I hung up and slid the phone into my coat pocket. I wasn't angry, not even frustrated. This moment was clarity. The kind that only comes when the personal pain fades into professional purpose. I walked 3 blocks to where my driver was waiting. Lucas opened the door as soon as he saw me. "Didn't expect you so soon." "Neither did I." "You all right?" he asked, studying my face in the rear view. I hesitated. "My brother said something tonight." Lucas didn't say anything, but I saw his knuckles tighten around the steering wheel. "He said money couldn't buy me a seat at the table." I continued. And he's right, because I never wanted a seat at that table. Lucas nodded once. Their loss. I looked out the window as the city moved around me. Alive, vibrant, indifferent, just like it had always been. That was the thing about New York. It didn't care about your last name. It cared about what you built. I reached into my bag, pulled out my tablet, and started scrolling through the live analytics. Apex's strategy was aggressive, but not clever. We had the upper hand. We just had to move fast and clean. My mind was racing, but my heart had slowed. That was the strange thing about pain when you're used to it. It sharpens you, hardens the edges, focuses the fire. I remembered the first night I pitched Innovation Dynamics. Just me, a whiteboard, and 2 broken chairs in a shared co-working space. My hands shook the whole time. No one clapped then either. They didn't put me on the terrace to punish me. They put me there because they still saw me as that weird little girl who liked machines more than manners, the one who didn't laugh at the right jokes or play by their rules. But I had built something they couldn't even define. And now it was time to make sure they saw it, whether they wanted to or not. The wind followed me even after I shut the car door behind me. It wasn't the kind of chill you shake off with a scarf. It was older than the air, older than the city itself. It was the kind of cold that lives in your bones, carved there by memory. I sat back in the leather seat, let the skyline move past, and allowed the silence to settle. Ethan's words were still in my head, curling like smoke. Not because they were clever, because they were familiar. I'd heard them before. Not in those exact words, but in tone, in glances, in every time I was passed over at the dinner table or spoken over in a conversation. I used to think success would mute that voice, that if I built enough, earned enough, won enough, it would all finally balance out. But sitting on that rooftop, watching my family toast my father without me, I knew that ache was still there. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they'd never cared to know what enough even meant to me. My thoughts drifted backward, uninvited. They always did when silence lingered. I was 10 when I brought home my first robot. It wasn't really a robot. It was a collection of scavenged gears and wires, taped to a moving toothbrush head. It danced in shaky circles across the kitchen floor. I thought it was brilliant. Mom told me to pick it up before it scratched the tiles. Dad barely looked up from the sports section. That thing better not have come from the garage. Ethan, of course, had just won a student essay contest about President Lincoln. His certificate hung on the fridge for months. That was the beginning of the pattern. His achievements were dinner conversation. Mine were background noise. At 13, I built a simple app, just a calculator with a few tweaks. I showed Dad, hoping for a spark of interest. "You should be careful," he said. "Spending too much time on screens isn't good for a girl." A girl, not a builder, not a creator. A girl. I think that was the first time I realized. I could achieve anything, but if it didn't fit their mold, it didn't count. By the time I got to Caltech, I'd stopped telling them anything real. I'd email photos, updates, even newspaper clippings when one of my early projects got attention. They replied with one-liners. "Nice. Cool. Hope you're eating well." Meanwhile, when Ethan got hired at some mid-tier consulting firm, the family threw him a surprise party. There was one memory I tried not to think about, but tonight it clawed its way back. Christmas, my sophomore year. I flew home from California, red-eye flight, final exams barely behind me. I walked in with a gift I'd handmade, a framed, custom-coded visual of Dad's favorite stock trends across the past decade, complete with interactive features. He unwrapped it, smiled stiffly, and said, "Is this art?" "It's functional," I said. "You can track your portfolio with it. It updates live." He nodded. "I see. Interesting." That was it. No follow-up, no questions. Later, he told Ethan he was getting a Fitbit for being so on top of his health. I remember watching that exchange and feeling something I couldn't name then, but I can now. I was grieving something that had never existed. The idea of being cherished. Lucas's voice cut into my thoughts. "You want to go straight to the office, or—" I shook myself back to the present. "Let's take the long way." He nodded, adjusted the route. "I didn't expect it to hit me this hard," I admitted. "What did he say to you?" I hesitated. "He said money couldn't buy me a seat at the table." Lucas whistled under his breath. "That's rich." "He meant the family table," I added. Lucas didn't laugh. He knew better. "You know what the worst part is?" I said. "He's not even wrong. You can't buy your way into that kind of space. You either get chosen or you don't. And I never was." Lucas glanced at me through the mirror. "Harper, you built your own table." "Yeah," I said, but part of me still wanted them to pull up a chair. That truth hurt more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about every year before this one. Every version of myself that kept knocking on a door that was never going to open. I remembered the first investor pitch I ever gave. I was 24, nervous, wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit. The guy across the table listened politely, then asked, "Do you have a tech lead? Someone with real experience?" "I'm the tech lead," I said. He blinked, surprised. Then he smiled like I was cute. That night, I worked until 4 a.m., rewriting the pitch deck. No one in my family knew that story. They didn't know about the loan I took that almost ruined my credit, or the night I couldn't afford groceries and lived on cereal. They didn't know that I learned leadership by necessity, by holding people together when the servers went down, when payroll almost bounced, when a key partner pulled out 12 hours before launch. They didn't know because they never asked. But the people I led, the ones who followed me through pivots and failures and late-night sprints, they knew. They saw me. And maybe that's what finally started to shift inside me tonight. Maybe I didn't need to be seen by them. Maybe I needed to start honoring the people who already did. Lucas pulled into the curb slowly. We were still a few blocks from the office, but I told him to stop here. I needed air. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I just want to walk the rest." He rolled down the window slightly. "You good?" I smiled, tight but sincere. "Getting there." I stepped out, let the cool air bite a little deeper. This city had raised me in ways my family never could. It had tested me, yes, but it had also offered me space. Space to fall, to rise, to define myself. Tonight hurt, but it was also clarifying, because when you stop chasing the people who never clapped, you finally start hearing the applause that's been there all along. And I wasn't walking alone anymore. I was walking toward something I'd built with my own hands. The walk to the office cleared my head more than I expected. The cool air, the rhythm of my steps, the city lights reflecting off the glass. It all felt like motion with purpose. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward the life I'd chosen, the one I'd built with both defiance and grace. By the time I stepped into the elevator of Innovation Dynamics, I was back in that other part of myself, the CEO, the builder, the woman who had fought tooth and nail to make space in a world that never offered her a seat. The lobby lights clicked on automatically as I entered. Quiet, clean, familiar. But none of this existed 10 years ago. There was a time when Innovation Dynamics was just a name scribbled at the top of a legal pad, underlined twice, surrounded by question marks. I remember the night it began. I was 24, working a contract gig, fixing back-end bugs for a retail site. I was underpaid, overworked, and invisible. I didn't hate the work, I hated how meaningless it felt. Every time I pushed a successful update, someone else's name got the credit. One evening, I stayed late in the shared workspace. Everyone had gone home, the lights half off, the hum of servers the only sound. And I pulled out that legal pad. I didn't have a business plan yet, just ideas and frustration. I wrote, what would it look like if data tools were built for people, not systems? I didn't know then that it would turn into something real, but I knew I had to try. The first version of the platform was crude. Basic UX, half the features broken. I launched it anyway, sent it to a few forums, some friends from Caltech, 2 professors I admired. One of them replied, "Not bad," he said. "If you fix the API calls, I'll connect you with a friend at Metadata." That became my first small win, but the next 12 months were brutal. I worked from a rented desk in a co-working space with no heat on weekends. My meals were mostly granola bars and discount sushi. I pitched 47 investors in total. 44 said no. Some were polite, most were not. One man, mid-50s, navy suit, expensive haircut, told me flat out, "You have the energy, but you're alone. This is a team sport. Find a male CTO or come back when you're serious." I smiled, thanked him, then went home and cried until 2 in the morning. But I didn't stop. I hired my first developer, Marcus, using money I'd saved from freelancing. He believed in the product. I didn't know it then, but that hire changed everything. He stayed. Through the crashes, the bugs, the nights we thought we'd have to shut it all down, we signed our first client 7 months later. A regional hospital looking to streamline patient analytics. They paid us $9,200. I'd never seen that much money hit our account before. I sat in front of the screen and just stared at the number. Then I burst into tears. Not because of the money, but because it felt like someone, somewhere, finally said, "We see you." Still, the journey was anything but smooth. We missed deadlines, lost a key client to a flashier competitor. Once our servers went down for 16 hours and nearly cost us everything. I remember lying on the office floor at 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling fan, wondering if I was chasing a dream no one else believed in. And then I got up. Because when you build something from nothing, no one's coming to rescue you. That's the lesson I learned again and again. Resilience wasn't a trait. It was a muscle, and I was done waiting for someone else to carry the weight. I started attending pitch nights, not just to raise money, but to study. I watched how people spoke, how they dressed, how they handled rejection. I rewrote our deck a dozen times, practiced our demo until my throat went raw. Then one night, everything changed. We were invited to present at a startup showcase in Chicago. I had 8 minutes on stage, just me, a slide deck, and one shot. I told our story, showed the product, took questions. The room was full, but I spoke like it was one-on-one. I didn't sell hype, I sold honesty. Afterward, a woman approached me, older, sharp eyes, dark blue coat. "You built this alone?" she asked. "With a small team," I said. "But yes, I've led it from the start." She handed me her card. "I'm Rachel Lee, Managing Partner, Northstone Ventures. Call me Monday." 2 months later, we closed our first real round of funding. That money didn't just keep the lights on, it bought time, breathing room, a chance to grow without drowning. And it marked the first time I let myself believe, maybe this isn't just a hustle, Maybe this is a company. I stood now in the hallway of that company's 20th floor, looking at the team photos framed on the wall. Launch day, first full team retreat, the day we hit 1 million users. I smiled. It wasn't pride exactly. It was recognition. I remembered every sleepless night, every no, every silent dinner phone call home, where no one asked how I was doing. And yet, here I stood. Not because someone handed me a ladder, but because I built one out of rejection. I walked to the boardroom and flicked on the light. The long glass table reflected back a woman I barely recognized from that girl at the dining room table with the blinking light. But she was still in me, still fighting, still hoping, and still building. I used to believe family was a bloodline, a birthright, a fixed thing, that it came with a shared name, a shared history, and an unspoken contract to love each other no matter what. But somewhere along the way, maybe during a 2 a.m. bug fix or one of those lonely late-night walks, after a pitch went nowhere, I realized something. Family isn't always inherited. Sometimes it's built. It starts in the small moments. Someone showing up when they don't have to. Someone staying when it would have been easier to walk away. Someone seeing you, not for your resume, not for your success, but for who you are beneath it all. And I was lucky enough to find a few of those people. Ava came first. She walked into our shoebox office one rainy Thursday morning, wearing a leather jacket and carrying a chipped coffee mug that said, "Break things better." She looked around, saw 3 exhausted people hunched over laptops, and said, "You're going to need better code structure, better chairs, and someone who tells you the truth." She was right on all 3 counts. Ava was brilliant, relentless, and allergic to corporate nonsense. She joined Innovation Dynamics when we were still fixing our own plumbing and buying coffee in bulk. She didn't care about perks or options. She cared about building something that worked. She stayed through the worst parts, when payroll almost bounced, when a product release crashed live, when I lost my temper in a meeting and thought I'd pushed everyone too far. She never flinched. "You want a company that matters," she told me once, during a tense 1 a.m. debugging session. "Then you're going to have to let it break you a little, but I'll be here when it does." And she always was. Then there was Marcus. He was my first hire and still one of the most gifted back-end developers I've ever met. He called himself a code poet, said logic had rhythm if you listened for it. He was young when he joined, barely out of college, but wise in ways that mattered. During our first big pitch, our prototype froze mid-demo. My heart stopped, but Marcus, he didn't panic. He leaned over, restarted the module in real time, and whispered, "We've got this." Afterward, he gave me a high five like we'd just won a game. He never treated me like I had something to prove. He treated me like I already belonged. And then there was Lucas. He was supposed to be temporary, a fill-in driver when my usual guy canceled. But he showed up the next day, and the next, always early, always calm, always quiet, but never distant. One time, after a brutal board meeting where one of our investors undermined me in front of everyone, I got into the car trembling. I didn't say a word. Lucas glanced at me in the mirror and asked, "Want to take the long way home?" We drove for almost an hour. He didn't speak, didn't ask, just let me breathe. After that, I stopped calling anyone else. And there were others. Sandra in legal, who once worked 48 hours straight to help us close our first real contract. Luis from IT, who brought me soup the week I had the flu but refused to go home. Yasmin from finance, who mailed my mom a thank you note after I spoke at a Women in Tech panel, because she wanted her to know how proud we were of Harper. None of them were in my family photos. But they were in every success, every breakthrough, every memory that truly mattered. One night, months before that rooftop dinner, we were pulling an all-nighter before a major product launch. The office was a mess, empty coffee cups, wires everywhere, whiteboards covered in diagrams and nonsense. Someone brought in 2 bottles of cheap wine and a bag of chips. Ava hacked the office stereo and started playing 2000s R&B. At first, we just joked around. Then Marcus started dancing like a complete idiot. Luis joined him. Yasmin laughed so hard she fell off a beanbag. I stood there, leaning against the glass wall, watching them, my team, my people, laughing, dancing, singing off-key. And I thought, this is what family feels like. Not obligation, not comparison, but presence, loyalty, care. It hit me hard because I realized I had stopped hoping to be chosen by the family I was born into, and started choosing the family that had shown up for me all along. They didn't care that I wasn't the kind of daughter who showed up to every holiday. They didn't care that I sometimes forgot to eat, forgot to reply, forgot to sleep. They just reminded me, gently, consistently, that I mattered. To them, to the work, to this strange little ecosystem we'd built together. And the truth is, I needed them more than I ever let on. Because leadership is lonely, building something from scratch is brutal. There were nights I cried in the bathroom, doubting everything, and mornings I woke up with panic already in my throat. But then I'd walk into the office and hear Ava arguing with Marcus about variable names, or see Lucas with a coffee already waiting, and the fog would lift just a little. They grounded me. Not with praise, not with perfection, but with presence. The kind that doesn't fade when things go wrong. The kind that says, we see you, all of you, and we're still here. So no, I didn't have the kind of family people write novels about. But I had something better. I had a team that became a tribe, a workplace that became a sanctuary, a group of misfits and builders who looked at me, not as the girl who never fit in, but as the woman who brought them all together. I didn't grow up in a home where I felt seen, but I built one. I thought I had left it behind, that hollow feeling of being tolerated but never embraced. But as I walked back through the glass doors of the Metropolitan, coat still on my arm, I felt it wrap around me again. That familiar chill. I wasn't planning to stay. After the call with Ava, I had every intention of leaving quietly, slipping out the way I came in. But fate had other plans, or maybe it was pride or unfinished business. The lights inside had dimmed. The dinner plates were cleared, glasses refilled. The music softer now, elegant and forgettable. I saw them all gathered, my family dressed in expensive fabrics, laughing politely, as if the world had always been kind. I turned toward the terrace, one last glance, grab the coat, and go. But halfway there, a voice stopped me. Harper. It was my father. He stood near the doorway, drink in hand, tie loosened just enough to look casual but not vulnerable. I thought you left, he said. I did, I replied. Just came back for my coat. A beat passed. You didn't have to sit out there, you know. I raised an eyebrow. You think I chose the wind and a solo table for fun? He sighed, took a slow sip. You always take things too personally. And you always pretend not to notice what you orchestrate. He looked past me, toward the city skyline, as if I hadn't spoken. It's your brother's event, too. Ethan coordinated the seating. Of course he did. As if summoned, Ethan appeared, carrying a half-empty glass of something golden. He looked amused, the kind of amused that always meant trouble. What's this? He asked. Another dramatic exit? No, I said. I'm just collecting what's mine. Well, let me guess. You've got a jet waiting, or a rocket launch, or whatever billionaires do on Thursday nights. I kept my voice calm. Still not funny, Ethan. He stepped closer. Still taking everything like it's a personal attack. God, Harper, relax. I'm relaxed, I said. I'm just done being condescended to by people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in my world. That made his smile falter just a little. My father cleared his throat. This is supposed to be a celebration. For who? I asked. For the golden son? For the family that still doesn't know how to treat its daughter like she matters? You've changed, he said suddenly. Not with admiration, more like an accusation. You used to want our approval. Now you walk around like you're above us. I stopped begging for what was never offered. Unfair, he said. True, I replied. There was tension now, thick enough to drown in. I thought he might step back, but instead, he pressed forward. Let me be clear, he said. We are proud of you. We just don't always understand you. You never tried to. Ethan scoffed. Here we go again, the victim monologue. I turned to him. This coming from the guy who once said I'd grow out of this tech phase. He shrugged. It was a phase until it wasn't. Congratulations, I guess. Generous of you. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, thankful for the interruption. Ava, Harper. Apex just revised their bid. Legal says we need eyes on it ASAP. I exhaled. Timing, Ethan noticed. Let me guess, another emergency, or just using work as an excuse again? I looked up at him slowly. You think it's an excuse because you've never built anything in your life that actually mattered. That hit harder than expected. His jaw tensed. My father stepped between us. Enough. But I wasn't done. You still see me as the girl in her room, taking apart radios. Like I haven't changed. Like I haven't built something that reshaped our field. You haven't reshaped anything, Ethan snapped. You've just gotten good at PR. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that says I'm happy. The kind that says I'm finished. You think this is PR? I said. Tomorrow morning, I'll be in a meeting with DataCore to finalize a $1.5 billion acquisition. Innovation Dynamics will become one of the most valuable data integration firms in the country. They both froze. That's billion, I said, letting it hang. Ethan laughed once. You're bluffing. I don't need to bluff, I said. I have board minutes, contracts, and teams in 3 time zones getting ready for it. My father looked at me, really looked, for maybe the first time in years. Then, instead of saying anything meaningful, he said, If that's true, why didn't you tell us? I stared at him. Because you never asked, I said. And with that, I turned. I didn't wait for another reply. I walked past the table, past the people I used to beg to understand me, and into the night. The cold air felt cleaner than the chandelier-lit warmth inside. My phone buzzed again. I answered. Ava, I said. Send the documents to my tablet. I'll review them on the way. Where are you headed? She asked. I paused, 1 foot already at the curb. A place where I get to decide the seating chart. I didn't leave the Metropolitan feeling victorious. I left feeling like a fault line, quiet on the surface, but something inside had shifted for good. Lucas pulled up before I reached the curb. He didn't say anything as I opened the door, didn't ask where to. He just waited. Drive, I said softly. Anywhere. He nodded and pulled away. The silence between us felt familiar, safe. The city lights reflected off the windows, dancing across my face as I sat still, watching the night blur past. After a while, Lucas asked, You okay? I hesitated. No, but I think I'm finally done pretending I will be. if they just say the right thing. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. I didn't need to see anything right now. I just needed to feel the car move, proof that I wasn't stuck. For years, I thought the pain would go away once I succeeded, that if I built something big enough, loud enough, undeniable enough, my family would finally see me. But tonight, I realized it was never about how bright I shined. It was about their refusal to look. I had begged to be seen, but never dared to admit. Maybe they were never capable of it. I thought back to small things, seemingly forgettable moments that had been branded into me. When I won a citywide math competition at 12 and Dad said, "That's nice, but don't get cocky." When Ethan brought home a B+ in chemistry and got steak for dinner. When I presented my first prototype in college and emailed the family group thread, and no one replied. The silence hurt more than any insult. Because silence means you're not worth the energy to notice. Lucas pulled over near the river. The Hudson stretched wide and quiet beside us. "You want to get out?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." We stepped into the chill. It cut across my cheeks, but I welcomed it. At least it was honest. I walked slowly to the railing and looked out at the water, cold, steady, ancient. "I thought I'd feel relieved," I said, "after saying everything to them. I thought it would lift off my chest." "And?" Lucas asked. "I feel scraped raw." He nodded. "Truth does that." I wrapped my coat tighter. They made me think I had to earn being loved. They were wrong. "I know," I said, "but some part of me still believed it until about an hour ago." I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone. I opened my voice recorder, hit record, and let the words come. "My name is Harper Hayes," I said, my voice low but sure. "I was raised in a family that taught me love is something you earn by becoming smaller, by being agreeable, by not shining too bright." I took a breath. I spent years trying to meet that definition. I succeeded in ways they couldn't imagine, and still it was never enough. And now I see why, because I was never the problem. I paused. I'm not bitter. I am not broken. I'm just done asking to be invited into spaces that were never built to hold someone like me. I hit stop, saved it, not for sharing, just for keeping. A timestamp on my turning point. Back in the car, I opened my tablet. A message from Ava blinked at the top of the screen. "Ava, Apex revised terms again. They're pushing hard, trying to corner us." I typed, "Me, let them try. Prepare a clean counteroffer. Call at 7. We play this on our terms." Ava, "Got it. Standing by." Then another line from her. "Ava, we've got your back, always." My chest tightened again. Not from pain, from recognition. That word again. We. The one I had spent years craving. I found it, not in the house I grew up in, but in the team I built. I looked out the window again. The skyline rose in jagged lines and blinking promise. Somewhere in that maze of glass and ambition, I had carved out something real. They didn't clap when I first succeeded. They didn't celebrate the first $1 million deal. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the risk, the grind. But I did. And the people beside me, Ava, Marcus, Lucas, the whole team, they saw it too. That was family. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who shows up, listens, believes. We pulled up to my building. I didn't get out right away. "Lucas," I said, "thank you." "For what?" "For not needing me to explain everything to be there." He gave a small smile. "Some things don't need words." Upstairs, I poured myself a drink, not out of stress, but ceremony. I opened the windows, letting the air in, even if it was cold. I stood barefoot in front of the city, drink in hand, and whispered, I'm done asking. That was my vow. No more shrinking, no more waiting for applause from the wrong rooms, no more chasing seats at tables built to ignore me. Tomorrow I would walk into that boardroom, not as someone trying to prove her worth, but as someone who finally knew it. And that changed everything. The sun wasn't up yet, but I was. There's something sacred about the hours before the world wakes up. No emails, no phones, no noise, just breath and clarity. I stood barefoot in my kitchen, coffee brewing, steam curling in soft spirals. My laptop glowed on the counter, waiting. Ava had sent the final version of our pitch deck before dawn. Subject line, final armor, all edge, no softness. That was her way of saying, we're done asking. But to me, today didn't feel like battle. It felt like coming home, not to a place, to a version of myself I had buried under years of trying to be less. Lucas pulled up outside, right on time. He didn't say anything when I got in, just nodded once, like a soldier ready to drive the general to the front lines. You good? He asked after a block. Better than good, I said. They just don't know it yet. The city slid by, still yawning and stretching into life. I watched the blur of buildings and lights while reviewing Ava's notes. Every word in that presentation had weight. Every number, every clause, placed with surgical precision. We weren't walking into that meeting to beg. We were walking in to declare. At the office, Ava was already pacing, hair in a tight bun, black suit, sleeves rolled. Her version of battle armor. Clause 14, she said, handing me a marked-up sheet. They're trying to bury a 5-year exclusivity clause inside friendly language. Classic Apex, I muttered. They think we'll miss it, I smiled. Then they've forgotten who built this company, line by line, clause by clause. She looked up, sharp eyes locking on mine. Let's remind them. By 7:55, the whole team had assembled. Legal, finance, engineering, no hype, no pre-game speeches, just quiet resolve. I stood at the head of the table. This isn't about getting the deal, I said. It's about showing them we no longer operate from lack. We're not chasing, we're choosing. A few nods, focused eyes. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about precision. At 8:30, the screen lit up. Apex appeared, Carter Wells and his executive entourage, every one of them looking like they'd just stepped out of a Forbes cover shoot. Polished, relaxed, rehearsed. Harper, Carter said, his voice smooth. Glad we could finally talk live. We're optimistic we can close today. I leaned forward slightly. Depends how well you listened yesterday. What followed was a 40-minute waltz of numbers, strategies, veiled threats, and faux charm. They pitched their final offer like it was a gift. But I wasn't looking for presents. I was listening for truth, and I didn't hear it. I'll be blunt, I said when Carter finished. Your offer doesn't reflect the reality of who we are. He blinked. I'm not sure I follow. You've undervalued the technology, overreached on equity, and assumed we'd trade legacy for convenience. That's not how we built this company, and it's not how we'll sell it. He tried to recover. With all due respect, I held up a hand, calm, certain. No disrespect taken, just clarity returned. We're finalizing with DataCore, the paperwork's already moving. A silence fell like snow. Then, you're making a mistake. I smiled. If protecting integrity is a mistake, I'm happy to repeat it. When the call ended, no one in the room clapped, no high fives, just deep, full silence, the kind that says, we did exactly what we came to do. Ava looked at me from across the table. I've never seen you that still. I've never been that clear. She gathered her things. Your father's going to hear about this. I met her gaze. Let him. She raised a brow. And Ethan? I stood, rolling down my sleeves. They watched me build the fire, now they'll feel the heat. I took the elevator down alone. It was the same building, same glass, same buttons, but it felt like I was moving through a different world. One where I no longer needed anyone to validate the space I stood in. I wasn't just leading a company, I was leading myself. On the street, the city had hit full rhythm, horns, crosswalks, the chatter of caffeinated ambition. But I stood still, breathing, not to center myself, to mark this moment, because I would remember this, not for the win, but for the stillness after the fight, the way it felt to finally stop asking. It started with an invitation I almost threw away, a cream-colored envelope, gold embossing, my father's handwriting on the front, still sharp, still deliberate. Inside, an invitation to the annual Hayes Foundation Gala, the kind of family event where everyone wore the right suit, drank the right wine, and said all the wrong things in the most polished way. I hadn't been invited in 5 years, not once since I stopped trying to be palatable. I held that envelope over the trash for a full minute. My thumb hovered on the flap like a challenge. For a long time, I thought showing up to things like this meant I still needed something from them. But that day, something shifted. I didn't feel bitterness, I felt power. The night of the gala, I didn't try to blend in. I wore a midnight blue suit, tailored, bold, minimal. No sparkle, no softening, just lines sharp enough to slice through legacy. I arrived alone, not because I didn't have people, but because tonight I didn't need backup. I was the backup. The doorman froze when he saw my name on the RSVP list. A few heads turned before I even entered the main room. Let them turn. I didn't come to be overlooked. The room shimmered with performance, tuxedos, red lips, false laughs. My father's circle of donors and disciples stood in their usual arrangement, confident, conventional, boring. I walked through the crowd like I belonged, because I did. Ethan spotted me first. He approached with that politician's smile he always practiced in the mirror. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, swirling his drink. "I know," I said. "That's why I came." He smirked. "Making headlines again, huh?" "No," I replied. "Making impact. Headlines just followed." "Dad's not thrilled." "He doesn't have to be." He opened his mouth, then shut it. For once, he had no follow-up. I paused near a mirror in the hallway, and for a moment I saw her again, my younger self, the one who stood here at 24, eager, overdressed, holding a folder of ideas go unasked for. She had waited all night to get a word in, to be noticed. She had left the event in tears. Tonight, she just watched me nod at her. And I kept walking. In the atrium, the light glinted off crystal and silver. Camera crews hovered. My father stood under the main chandelier, laughing with investors. He didn't see me until I was within 10 feet. Then a flicker. His smile faltered for half a second. Not enough for the crowd to notice, but I saw it. I didn't stop. I didn't offer a greeting. I walked past, calm, deliberate. He gave a small nod. I returned it. That was all. No confrontation, no apology, just acknowledgement and then air. A reporter caught me before I could slip to the edge of the room. "Ms. Hayes," she said, "may I ask what tonight means to you?" I tilted my head. Perspective. "And your recent acquisition, DataCore?" "It wasn't brave," I said. "It was overdue." She smiled. "Is your family supportive?" I gave a measured smile. "They no longer define my decisions." That was the only quote that made the papers. But it was enough. Later, Mr. Langston approached me, an old donor, longtime friend of my father, The same man who once dismissed my first pitch without opening the deck. "Harper," he said, offering a hand, "you've come a long way." I shook it. "I didn't come, I built." He nodded. "Impressive work." "It wasn't for them," I replied. "It was for me." He hesitated, then said quietly, "We underestimated you." I looked him in the eye. "That's why I'm dangerous now. I didn't stay for dessert, didn't stay for speeches." I stood quietly near the back as my family floated across the stage in practiced poses and well-rehearsed charm. I didn't feel rage or sadness, just release. This place once shrunk me, but tonight I didn't shrink. I stood tall, whole, unmoved. On my way out, my father stepped in my path, just us, no crowd, no camera. "You've made your point," he said, voice low. "No," I said. "I made my mark." He looked tired, or maybe older. "You've changed." "No," I replied. I stopped apologizing. We stood there for one breath, two. Then I turned and walked away. Outside, the night welcomed me like a friend. The city buzzed around me, honking cabs, heels against pavement, wind between towers. And yet inside, everything was still. I opened my clutch and pulled out the envelope. The invitation. I unfolded it, looked at the name printed in perfect serif letters. Then, slowly, I tore it in half. Let the pieces fall into the trash beside me. Quietly, decisively. I didn't need to be invited anymore. I was the room. The next morning, I didn't wake up early. I let the sunlight warm my face before I opened my eyes. For once, I didn't feel the need to move. No agenda, no calls, no headlines to chase. Just the sound of the city slowly coming alive beyond my windows. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I made tea instead of coffee. It felt right. Tea forced me to wait, to breathe, to steep. The kettle sang softly as I stood barefoot by the stove, still in my robe, hair undone. I wasn't rushing anywhere. There were already a dozen notifications on my phone. Ava had messaged, Lucas sent a flame emoji. A few reporters had reached out for comment. The quote from last night had apparently gone viral, but I didn't open any of it. Let the world spin. I was standing still, and for once I liked it. After breakfast, I went for a walk. No headphones, no phone in hand, just me. I passed by buildings that once felt intimidating, towers of glass and steel that seemed designed to keep people like me out. But now I walked past them like they were just scenery. Some of them had my name in their directories, and still I didn't stop, because I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was simply here. By noon, I found myself wandering into a small park I hadn't visited in years. There was a bench near a koi pond. I sat there for a long time, watched the water, watched the way it held movement and stillness at the same time. A little girl walked by, holding her mother's hand. She looked at me, smiled shyly, and kept going. It made me think of my own mother, of the way she used to hold my hand a little tighter when she wanted me to slow down, of the way she whispered, "You don't have to run to be enough." Back then, I didn't believe her. Now I do. At home, I opened the windows and let fresh air pour in. I lit a candle. I picked up my old journal, the one I'd abandoned when things got too busy, and wrote a single sentence. I am no longer holding my breath. Then I closed it. That was enough. Ava called in the afternoon. "Are you still alive?" she asked. "Because you ghosted your own victory parade." I laughed. "I'm here, just not parading." "You okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm whole." There was a pause. Then she said, "I think I've only ever heard you say that once before." "I wasn't telling the truth back then," I said. "Now I am." In the evening, I opened the closet and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were pieces of my past, notes from my first prototype, old rejection letters, photos of me on panels where no one remembered my name. At the bottom, I found the notebook I had carried to my very first investor meeting, the one where I was told I had too much conviction for someone with no results. I ran my fingers over it, then I quietly walked to the fireplace, and I fed the pages in one by one. Not out of anger, but out of release. They had served their purpose. I no longer needed the proof that I had been dismissed. I was living the answer. At sunset, I stood on my balcony and let the wind run through my hair. The city below was buzzing, but I wasn't chasing it anymore. For so long, my life had been a series of nexts. The next milestone, the next validation, the next time someone would finally say, "You were right." But last night, walking out of that gala, I realized something. I didn't need to be right anymore. I just needed to be free. I picked up a pen, not to write strategy, not to plan, but to draw a single circle on a blank page. And inside it, I wrote, "This is mine, my time, my voice, my peace. No one gets to take it, not again." The last page is always the hardest to write, even when you're writing it just for yourself. But this isn't an ending. It's a beginning I can finally name. The day was quiet. No emails, no meetings, no noise. I sat at my kitchen table, the same seat where I once cried over rejection emails, over silence from my father, over numbers that didn't move the way I needed them to. But today, the room felt different, lighter, not because anything around me had changed, but because I had. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for closure. I was living in completion. I opened my journal and flipped through the pages. So many versions of me lived there. The daughter who begged to be enough. The woman who fought for her seat at the table. The founder who built success out of nothing but breath and belief. Each version was real. Each voice valid. But none of them were the whole of me. Now I didn't need an audience. I needed only the truth. And the truth was simple. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Later that morning, I called Ava. She answered like always, straight to the point. "So what now?" I laughed. "I don't know." There was silence on the line. Then she said, "That might be the most honest thing you've ever said." And she was right. I left my phone on the counter and stepped outside. No destination, just instinct. As I walked, the city moved around me, rushed, loud, urgent. But I moved slowly, with ease, with presence. Somewhere between 16th and Madison, I passed a little ceramic shop. The sign said, "Mend and Fire, Pottery, Peace." I walked in. The woman behind the counter smiled. First time, I nodded. She handed me clay. "Let your hands speak. Don't correct them." I sat and shaped, not for beauty, not for utility, just to feel what it was like to make something gently. When I got home, I placed the small, imperfect bowl I made on my shelf. No label, no meaning assigned. Just proof that I could create without conquering. That evening, I wrote a letter I never planned to send. "Dear Dad, I've stopped needing your voice to echo mine. Because mine is loud enough now. And maybe the greatest gift I ever gave myself was stepping out of your shadow and into my own shape. I love you, but I no longer wait for you. And that's okay." I folded the letter, placed it in the back of a drawer. No fanfare, just finality. The next morning, I walked past my old office building. Same revolving door, same mirrored glass, same logo that once intimidated me. I stood in front of the glass and looked at my reflection. Not to see if I looked strong, but because I finally looked like myself. No mask, no armor, just a woman who made it through. I stopped at a flower stand and picked out a single white lily. An hour later, I stood at my mother's grave. I kept going, I whispered, even when it hurt, even when I didn't know who I was yet. The wind brushed my face like a blessing. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. She always knew. Back home, I opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Old notes, rejection letters, drafts of pitches I no longer cared to refine. I thanked them, and then, piece by piece, I let them go. Not in fire, not in anger, just release. Like setting down a heavy coat after a long winter. That night, I cooked dinner for one, used the good plates, played jazz on vinyl, lit a candle, not because anyone was watching, but because I was watching. Later, I wrote this in a fresh journal. I no longer need to be right. I no longer need to be remembered. I only need to be real. I turned off the lights, let the candle flicker, and whispered into the quiet, "You did it. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but you made it, and now you're free." Then I smiled, closed my eyes, and slept. Not because I was tired, but because, for the first time in my life, I had finally stopped running. If you've ever been left out, sat at the edge so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable, or had to build yourself up without anyone clapping, then maybe you understand Harper better than most. Her story isn't just hers. It belongs to anyone who's ever chosen peace over proving, wholeness over winning. Have you ever lived through that moment? If so, I hope you've found your own kind of quiet freedom too.